I call the meeting to order at this time. I'd like to welcome everyone here today. Appreciate all of you taking your time to come out and take part in county business. And in our first line of business, we'll all stand, and Supervisor Nick Mitchell will lead us in our invocation, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance by Supervisor Mike Carter.
Let us pray. Dear Lord, thank you for the opportunity to come in here and do the county's business, be with us, and help us make good decisions for the betterment of all of Franklin County. In your name we pray, amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. First line of business today gives me great pleasure to make this announcement. We have two of our supervisors that recently took part in some training that the state of Virginia offered. It's the Supervisors Certification for County Supervisors program that's provided by the state of Virginia. It certifies supervisors in different programs. They had to take some training that involved budgeting, planning, land use, infrastructure, and leadership. And so at this time, I would ask Supervisor Marshall Jamison and Supervisor Lori Smith, if they would, to meet me down front. I'd like to present them with a plaque and take an opportunity to take a few pictures. Y'all will meet me up front? Around here. This is a great opportunity, and I just have to take my hat off to these two to take the initiative and the time to go and complete this training. I know Supervisor Smith was unable to attend our VACO conference this last week, but we want to take time and recognize both she and Supervisor Jamison for their hard work and the accomplishment in this. This says Virginia Certified County Supervisors Program. The Virginia Association of Counties hereby recognizes and congratulates Marshall Jamison of Franklin County, class of 2024. And the Virginia Association of Counties hereby recognizes and congratulates Lori Smith of Franklin County, class of 2024. Thank y'all.
Make sure I'm not holding it upside down.
I will.
Okay, Board, any thoughts or concerns about today's agenda? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve today's agenda.
I will.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve today's agenda. Any further discussion before I ask for a final vote? Seeing none, all in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Let the record show there are none opposed.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
if I may, with our broadband meeting coming up on Thursday, Mr. Sandy, if you don't mind, I'd like to kind of bring this approval into just, into the minutes and the record for the Broadband Authority meeting as well. Is that okay? The, make ready.
Number one on the consent agenda?
Yes.
Okay.
We don't need to reapprove it. I just think it's germane to our
Okay.
meeting.
All right. In regard to the consent agenda, Board, are there any changes or deletions or any questions, comments anyone have about the consent agenda? Okay, what's your pleasure? Do we have a motion to pass the consent agenda?
I will.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion before I ask for a final vote? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, will you take a roll call, please?
Supervisor Jamison?
Yes.
Supervisor Mitchell?
Yes.
Supervisor Carter?
Yes.
Supervisor Smith?
Yes.
Supervisor Quinn?
Yes.
And Vice Chair Tatum?
Yes.
And Chairman Thompson is absent for the vote.
All right. Moving right along, Brian Casella, VDOT. Good to see you today. And if you will do me a favor, relay to the Sidnersville crew that they have done an outstanding job in the Henry community. And, too often if people complain about people, you hear about it, but nobody ever says a lot when they do a good job. And just tell them they've done a really good job in the community, and I really appreciate what they've done.
Absolutely. I'll be glad to share that message. Anytime we can go back with some good news, we would love to do that.
All right.
Well, it's good to be with you all here today for the VDOT Road Report. Looking at for the maintenance activities for the previous 30 days, we had, of course, just ordinary maintenance going on, but we have 2 pipe replacement projects that I'll note. Route 40 Franklin Street, and then Route 602 Callaway. We had a couple of pipes replaced on there. So that work is done. Our primary mowing for the season is now wrapped up, so we're done on that. Looking ahead for the next 30 days, 60 days, of course, ordinary maintenance, which will be brush cutting and things along those lines we'll do throughout the winter. I'll note that Route 657 Red Valley Road was closed for a pipe replacement, but actually we've now reopened it. We had previously reported it would be the 22nd, but we had good weather and good luck, so it's opened. Route 640, 6 Mile Post, that's going to be a road closure for, again, a pipe replacement, and we'll begin that first week of December. And then Route 220, you may have noticed some patching paving that we've been working on actively, some fresh pavement out there in advance of some schedule work coming for next year. And let's see, moving on to the second page, I'll just take you down to the bottom and note 2 completed traffic studies. The one that we actually got recommendations to do some improvements is Route 640, 6 Mile Post, and we're going to add 2 sets of chevrons and a nearby horizontal curve to better delineate the curve. And then over on the last page, we've got the 3 projects that we've been talking about the last couple of months that were bundled and went up for advertisement to include Route 220, 635 Bombrick Mill, 220, 697 Works Road, and 220, 619 Sontag Road. Those projects were out to bid. We received bids, and we have recommended for it to be awarded. Haven't been awarded just yet, so that'll be some construction to come next year. We'll have to see which order, because they're bundled with a couple of other projects on 220 between Henry and Roanoke, so we don't have a construction schedule yet, but good news is we got an award on it. Mr. Jamison, I just report the 613, NAF Road speed study. That's still in review. I don't have that on here, but I thought you might ask about it. I did see one that came back that was issued a month or so before that one. So maybe next month, or certainly by January, we might have something back for you. I know that's a pretty big undertaking because of the length. So that concludes my report, and I'll be glad to answer any questions.
All right, anyone have any questions? Go ahead, Laura.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Hi, Brian. It's good to have you this afternoon.
Great to be
Just
here.
a question off the cuff. I don't know that you'll even have an answer. We've had 2 fatalities, as you're aware, down on 122 coming up from the bridge. Or is there any conversation in your office regarding speed limit or any other potential mitigating factors that we need to be looking at?
So if you're referring to up at the Halesford Bridge on 122, yeah, that curve right through there, that should be a segment that is noted for those center line rumble strips.
Okay.
And that was a head-on collision.
Yep.
So I'm trying to think of where the other one was more recently.
The one more recently, I understand it was like that hour backup down through there. I think it was close to between Bojangles
And Aztec right
and
there?
Aztec, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, that
But having
segment,
2 fatalities in a relatively close amount of time sends me some messages that, are we missing something?
right. The center line rumble strips should work to reduce those anyway. And so I sent a little bit of information to you about the centerline rumble strips.
did, thank you.
And that's actually corridor wide, basically from town of Rocky Mount all the way up. And it's going to be in phases, so it'll be multiple years before we'll see all of that come together. What they're looking at first is for the 2025 schedule work that we have coming up, they are adding those centerline rumble strips into the contract. So the contractors will be actually doing that as a part of their new paving. Any pavement that we have in place that is good to very good condition, we can probably go ahead and add those there as well. As you know, Westlake, you've got the 3 to 5 lanes, the turn lanes and all that all through there, but the centerline turn lane, we'll skip that segment because it's already divided. So yes, that should over the next several years improve.
Yeah, I guess if any focus could be provided in that stretch of 122 in terms of timing, I would be interested in knowing if that is meaningful
Sure.
in terms of scheduling.
I'll look for what our next schedules on 122 that are coming up.
Thanks, Brian, I
Yes, ma'am.
appreciate it.
Yes, ma'am.
Anyone else? Go ahead, Nick.
Hey, Brian. The paving that is, I guess, come to completion on 619, I have received multiple calls, and I agree with them that it is below par. It's rough, especially right there at Grindstaff Store on Mount Carmel Road. What are y'all's plans to, what do they plan to do about that?
So yeah, that was contract work that we had. Nonetheless, it's pavement that we maintain, right? I wrote it today, and I think there's rights to complain about it. I've elevated that through our construction division. They've come out and looked at it with the contractor. The majority of it meets within our specifications. I can't speak to exactly what those specifications are, but I do think there's a bit of a rideability to it. We've identified some of the areas that are on the rougher side. They've left a paver behind, roller behind. They plan to come out and do some work to try to mitigate those joints. And so what I think we see and feel, and it's fairly repetitious, is where the paver would stop and trucks might exchange. That's my speculation. But they are going to try to address it and roll it after heating it. There may be some places where they'll put down some more aggregate to try to smooth those surfaces out even better than what they are. So I don't have a schedule for that. I would expect they would want to do that pretty quickly with the weather. So I can keep you posted on that.
So with that falling inside VDOT specs, does that mean that if after they heat it and roll it and do that work, there won't be, if that doesn't fix the problem, there won't be anything else done?
I can't guarantee anything, but I can certainly, if we have concerns that after that still, then I'll elevate it.
Okay, and will you let me know when they plan to do that work, please?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anyone else? I just had one thing. In the Ferrum area, right through there by the college and the elementary school, the speed limit was reduced several years ago for most of that to 40 miles an hour. And right there next to the Ferrum Park property, it goes from 40 to, I think, 55. Could we look into maybe extending that 40-mile reduced zone out to at least Turner's Creek Road?
Turner's Creek, okay.
And because there are a couple businesses through there. I know there's a dumpster site, county dumpster site in there, and a lot of turning vehicles. I think it would lend to be a little safer travel if it was reduced down to 40, at least to Turner's Creek.
Okay, we'll take a look at it.
All right, I appreciate it. Anyone else before we turn Brian loose?
Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Brian.
Thanks, Brian.
All right, moving right along, we'll go with a different Brian, Brian Carter. Give us some good news.
Let me get out of this. Here we go. All right, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the board. So for our finance report, you have us for several items today, so I apologize. You're going to get really tired of seeing me. For our finance report through October 31st, so this will be 4 months into the fiscal year. So we would expect to see around 30%. One of the things that we'll have this month Our percentages are adjusted a bit for what we call the accrual basis, and that's our revenues for the audit, because 1 or 2 months worth of this year revenues really applied to last fiscal year. So when you look at the percentages, instead of being around 33% for other local, it's at 23, but when you make that adjustment, we are okay. We're in line with where we would expect to be for this time of year. We're not concerned about any of our revenues at this point. Property taxes are still coming in. They're due December 5th. We will plan to monitor that. I do have some detailed charts on that so you can kind of see a little bit of a comparison on our real estate and personal when we get a little further in. For our percentages, we're pretty much within in line with our variation we'd expect for that 35% of the budget at this point, with the exception of the normal areas where we have a lot of front load because of agency memberships, partnerships, maintenance contracts, insurance, all of those things that are paid up front. Okay. So to graphically show the revenues for you, you can see there's a little bit of growth that we would expect over the prior year, which is the green line. And so to break that down a little further for you, most of the growth at this point is in property taxes. That is mostly driven by real estate, some personal, but some of that could be timing. A lot of that depends on when bills were issued and when payments are in, but some of that we would expect in real estate because of the 2-cent difference in what would have been the fully equalized rate. And so we would expect to see some growth in real estate regardless of the new construction that we would normally see. So for real estate, you can see, and because of the large collections, you can kind of see sometimes it gets a little hard, especially in the earlier months. So really October's where it picks up, which is why you haven't seen this to this point. You can start to see some separation now. So for October, you can see the purple line is the current year. We do see growth through this point of the time last year. It's about $1.2 million of an increase. That would be about what we would expect. If you remember, it was about a $2 million difference, about a million per penny. And so we're halfway through. So that would be about where we would expect our real estate to be compared year over year to this point in time. And so it's about 13% growth. So percent of budget really is difficult to monitor for taxes that aren't collected monthly, especially when you can adjust for seasonal fluctuations. So we're at 25%, but really that doesn't really matter. What I would really want to see is by the end of December, we're at least 50% of the budget for our property taxes. At that point, then it would be a real reasonable comparison. Okay. Personal, you're seeing a similar, that's only once a year. Real estate is twice a year. So for personal, you can see that we have the purple line. We do have growth year over year, $980,000 compared to that. At this point in time, that's about a 31% growth factor, but we're at 24% of the budget. So similar to reals at 25%. Really, the key indicating factor is going to be by the end of December, by the time all the mail-in payments are received and processed by the Treasurer's Office, where we'll actually look as far as where we land in the budget. That's 100%, so there's usually some, as you can tell in the future months, some additional collections, but we'll have a very good idea of where we're going to end the fiscal year in personal property by the end of December. So back to what you've seen the last several months, so for local sales tax, we actually were down a little bit for the month compared, and this is a 2-month lag, but when we look at that, we did drop. We're now at about only $43,000 year over year. So something that we want to continue to look at. We're above where we were 2 years ago, but below last year. And so that's really what we're comparing on the percentages at this point. It's too early to determine a trend. It's still above where we were last year, about 1.5%. And so we'll monitor that. I think you'll see that. We've seen this the last couple of months. We're seeing a tightening of the monthly taxes, the discretionary spending in a sense. We've basically seen that. If you notice the difference between the green line and the dark blue line, which are the prior 2 years, and the light blue line, which is this year, you can see that it's a lot tighter. There's not as big a gap in between those. So I think that's indicative of the spending. I think that's indicative of what you see in trillion-dollar debt with credit cards. People are just out of money. And so it does not surprise me at all that we're starting to see where cutbacks are happening on discretionary spending. And you'll see that on the other taxes as well. So for meals, we had a little bit better month. Last month, we were behind prior year by about 0.5%. We increased a little bit better, 0.4% behind, $2,300, not a significant amount, but it gets back to that tightening of the discretionary money that we're talking about. Okay. The same thing for occupancy. We're close. We're in line. We're only $2,700 less, about 1.2%. But you can see that that it is. We were a little bit ahead. Where we're ahead last month is actually about up 15%. But that seasonal drop off is what's kind of causing the fluctuation. So we're monitoring. That's why I think it's so critical for what we're going to see on property taxes as to where we should be concerned with these fluctuation on the monthly taxes. As a general rule, meals and occupancy are much less of the county budget. Sales tax is probably the most important of these three that we just reviewed. So general fund expenditures, they fluctuate. Timing, if you notice, September was up. It's down a little bit in October. Year over year, up a little bit. We would expect that because of the inflationary pressures on the budget that we would see in our normal households as well. Categorically showing this to you, breaking it down by really our reporting areas. It's really pretty static with what we've seen. Public safety is up. That typically is up because that is where most of the staff are. And so because we have a very heavy personnel-centric budget, because we're a service delivery organization, you typically see that, and those were planned increases in the public safety budget. They're within their percentage of budget as we'd expect. Health and welfare is up a little bit. I'll break that down a little more. So you can see we're up a little bit. They would have a similar impact to public safety. You would expect them to be up a little bit because of the personnel. They're very personnel-centric as well in their budget, especially the first category. The programs are more the federal spend, your TANF, your supplemental, your SNAP, those type benefits. Children's Services Act is actually down a little bit. I think a lot of that is timing. We're seeing increased costs. A lot of that, I think, is fluctuation between, again, accounting for expenses that we had July, August, and September that were really for prior year. So fully expect that to be ready to rebound for this year. I don't think we necessarily expect a significant drop-off in CSA costs. So fund balances and reserves, updated a little bit, still unaudited. Hopefully, we're hoping to have at least a draft of the statements. Don't have those yet. Still working with our auditors on those. Right now, when we account for previous board action on the approvals for some of the year-end surplus, when you look at our 20% policy minimum, we're about $19.7 million over that policy minimum at this point. Budget stabilization is $1 million, and capital reserve, actually, we restored that. That should be $1 million. Point that out. We'll update that for next month's report. So economic update, October did have a 2.6% CPI increase. That is above, of course, the 2% Federal Reserve benchmark that they'd like to get back to. Is actually a little bit higher than what it was in September. Core inflation is still 3.3%. Same thing we're seeing, driven by a lot of housing inflation. The unemployment rate was up approximately level at 4.1%, but the economy only created 12,000 jobs in the month of October. And so some of the fluctuation was related to our hurricane impact as well as the dock worker strike. At least that was the analysis. But if you remember, several of the months have been revised downward in the last 3-4 months as the Labor Department goes back and looks at that data. So you actually could have, by the time that's done, a negative job growth for the month of October. So I think what that's doing is, of course, indicating or informing the Federal Reserve's policy. So at their meeting earlier this month, they reduced their rate by another 1/4 percentage point. So their target rate now is about 4.75%. And so, and that's about where we're seeing on our investments. So we're starting to see the lowering of our investment earnings that we would anticipate, which we plan for in the budget. And so, but what we there has been some discussion of, because of some of the weakness in the job market and the economy still, the federal, or the uncertainty, I guess I should say, the Federal Reserve may dial back the frequency of the rate reductions until they get a better handle on it. There was discussion of a plan for maybe 4 rate reductions in 2025, and that may not happen. They may dial that back. So that helps us from an investment standpoint in our budget, but it's something we'll continue to monitor. Last meeting of the calendar year is December 17th and 18th. They didn't really give an indication at the November meeting if there'll be a further rate adjustment for the last meeting of this year. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions or provide some more detail.
Any questions from Mr. Carter?
Just a quick one.
Go ahead.
Brian, on the Federal Reserve, and you're saying that, and of course, we've considered and projected what the reduced rate increments may be. When we look at that 4.5 to 4.75, what roundabout number do we have projected in the 2025 budget?
In the 2025 budget,
Or
we actually...
24, 25, yeah.
Yes, ma'am. We estimated interest earnings at 3.5%.
Okay.
So even if they do quarter percentage points for another two or three times through the end of this fiscal year, I don't think we're going to get below that 3.5 percentage point planning budget. So at this point, I think what we have in our interest earnings that are helping pay for the operating budget that's recurring should be enough to get us through. Now, what I think that's going to do is put pressure on the 2026 budget as we get into our planning stages coming up, because we're probably going to have to drop that planning rate again, which will mean we'll have to make that revenue up in other areas.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Go ahead.
Just a comment, Brian, about the sales tax and the decline in occupancy. It'd be curious to look, typically in a lead up to a major election year, a presidential election, retail sales drop a little bit. So I wonder if maybe that's part of that correlation, because it's not a significant amount.
It's not, and hopefully that's the case. The reporting we get is very limited, especially on sales since it's state collected, but I would hope that would be the case. It's kind of an anomaly with what we've seen, so that would make a lot of sense. Continue to monitor.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Carter.
All right. Anyone else?
Ready for this one?
No further questions? Rolling right along.
Okay. So for this one, give me just a minute. I need to actually load this, so I apologize. Well, where'd the computer go? There it is. I'll reload that in a minute. No, I've got it. Thank you. So, for the rollover discussion, and make sure I get this one. Yeah. Okay. So for the rollover discussion, we wanted to kind of share with the board and give you a refresher on where we've been and what we're looking at and what we have today. And so if you remember, we had planned for an update from Davenport, and so there was a lot of discussion that was going to inform that, and we still have that. That's for Thursday. We weren't able to get them for today. And so given that, really what we plan to do today is go over the recommendations with you. Unless the board's ready, I don't think from a staff perspective we're looking for any action by the board today. We would like to go over it. We'd like for you to hear what Davenport presents Thursday. And then if the board is agreeable at the December 12th meeting, perhaps that's enough time to absorb and have some comments, questions answered, and be ready for action. So I want to caveat that to start with. If the board's ready today or has further questions we can answer and you're ready to act, that's just fine with staff, but didn't want the board to feel like that there's a pressure today on any action that's needed. And so what we would like to do as I get a little closer, could you hand this out? We got a handout coming that'll be a detailed list of the rollover requests. So when we get to that slide, we'll kind of walk through that a little bit, if that's okay with the board. Okay. So as a refresher, the operating surplus, we're still estimating at $3.5 million. And so right now with departmental savings, that's sitting at about $295,000 for the fiscal year. That's when we exclude CSA and social services. They had quite a bit of supplement that were needed to happen this year. And so we didn't feel like we wanted to pull down the rest of them. So I want to make sure we're clear. If you look at a report, you'll actually show the county had to supplement more. But for the sake of the discussion, and you'll see that on the handout, that's where we take that out. So if you remember from last month, we talked about that, and we made a couple of funding decisions. And so out of the rest of the $3.5 million, the increase is based on surplus for conservative budgeting on the revenue. So to refresh your memory, on the September 17th meeting, we approved just over $2 million, the board did, in capital funding. That was for restoring CIP capital. That was for the pharmacy implementation. That was kind of an unfunded mandate for public safety and the in-car camera system for the sheriff. We did another $1.2 million. The board approved that and appropriated at the October meeting, which was restoring the rest of the capital, which was mainly fire apparatus, and then some funding for the fire EMS program and restoring reserves. So that left $284,182. And so that number is what staff has been working off of for the rollover requests. And so for the next kind of items, we talked about the Davenport meeting. They'll be Thursday now on the 21st. So what we would like to do is go over the discussion of the requests. This is a table that really summarizes for you in a little bit different format, but the previous approvals that we did at the September and October meetings, just so that you get an idea. And we have a copy of this presentation we'll hand out to you as well. So you have this for reference later. But really, here are the rollover requests. So this is in summary. The sheet that you have in front of you is really the more detail. It just that the justification and all of that wasn't able to be fit on a PowerPoint slide. So if we can for a minute, I want to go over the handout that you received. So what staff did, and the reason why we asked for this, after the previous 2 rounds of board approval of capital funding, we reached back out to departments and asked, okay, so is some of your requests or all of your requests satisfied in the rollover since we've restored certain capital items? So after we received that feedback from departments, we amended this. So we removed it or reduced the amount they asked for at the department's direction. So this list is more what I would consider a concise list, but it is the unfiltered list. The justification is exactly as the department submitted it. So you see the full information, and then what staff can do today or at the December meeting is perfectly fine, is go through that with you as far as our justification. So what we looked at, we do not recommend as a general rule across the board funding recurring items with one-time money. So certain department requests were for what we consider recurring items, and so we did not recommend those, even if they might have been a top 1 or 2 priority. The other items we looked for one time. We looked for items that may not have a future operating impact. And we also tried to match the department priorities based on their budgetary savings. So on the handout, the far column to the left says it's the balance of the end-of-year operation. So we do not count personnel. Personnel is budgeted overall by the county. The departments really have no discretion of whether they save in that budget or not. If they have a vacant position, you may have some savings, but we also have some departments that may be over. That's not really a budget line item they manage. This is their non-personnel lines that they have discretion over managing. And so, because we don't over budget, we don't have extra positions in our departments. So the end of your operations, you'll see the amounts there, that far left, that's going to be what our departmental savings were for the fiscal year. And then the columns beyond that show them their priority. The next column shows what the department requested, and then the 4th column about the middle of the page is going to show your staff's recommendation. And then the justification, which is from the department, is the far right. Okay? And so what we're looking at, without going into line item by line item, is there's a lot of funding for office supplies or training, if we could fund that for within the departmental savings. There are a couple of things that we are looking at that are countywide. I do want to point some of those out that are probably more indicative. I think some of the larger ones. And so one of the things we're looking to do, really the first request for Treasurer's Office, even finance, is training office supplies with the savings that we had. There's even training on the first report for information technology. We're recommending $10,000 there. A couple of key items. The third request for information technology, the $15,425. That is a digital signage refresh at the front when you come in. That technology is very, very dated. So we had some money that had been restored by the board previously. That will help us fund that fully and refresh that technology. There's a lot of benefits that could come with that. That's more of a county-wide funding request. So, of course, we had a presidential election for the registrar's office. There are a couple of furniture needs for the general district court for really additional monitors. We tried to fund that. 911, their requests, they're smaller, but they were more for training because of short staffing, or for possibly looking at some extra overtime or such as that. But really, that's very limited. We already funded if you remember, the public safety request of the $200,000 pharmacy. That was the top one. So that kind of negated the savings there. We weren't able to fund their top request. And so really for the next one goes down to Public Works in a sense. And so that was for tuition for the landfill license for CDLs and such. And so we thought that would be, they did have departmental savings. We recommended that. Certainly struggling for drivers. So we thought maybe an incentive, say, well, we'll help fund that for you. General properties, additional maintenance at the courthouse. And so for Parks and Rec, it was a lot of either replacement of vehicles, aging services is one, or their passenger van. A little bit of money for trails and blueways. That was kind of the next priority before we reached the limit there. The library was additional meeting room space, community meeting rooms. We recognize that, so we recommend not the full amount. We recommend half, because that was the departmental savings. One thing that is required in planning, the $41,888, that is a software upgrade enhancement, and so there's some data conversion that needs to happen there. And so we recognize that's a real need for their department, and so we recommended funding that as far as rollover. I don't know that they'll be functional without that, and so we felt like that was a high priority. That was their number one priority request. And so economic development, there was a request for a marketing, implementation of a marketing plan for awareness for new businesses, and also a strategic plan and workforce alignment. And so we recommended funding both of those requests out of the remaining year in surplus. And for tourism, future event recruitment, I know Mr. Tosh has requested that. And so that would be things like your fishing tournaments and all of those to continue marketing. So all of that basically gets us to the $284,000 that we had available to us. And so what we'd like to do, if the board's okay with that, is you take the time to absorb. If there's any questions now you'd like to ask, because I really feel like it's unfair to you to have you read through this and really get a reasonable expectation of a review. But this is the detailed list, and what you have is exactly what staff went through in order to make the review. And if there are no detailed questions at this point, I'll skip to the next slide, and then we can maybe circle back if we're okay with that. Okay.
Keep on moving.
So next steps is to review the remaining $284,000. We do have the Davenport Planning Work Session November 21st. I know at least a couple of board members wanted to hear that before you made a decision. So that's going to be a detailed planning with some capacity, some review of our current projects, some scenario planning, as we always like to do with the board this time of year. And so really what we're looking at is at the December 12th meeting, give the board some time for staff to get any feedback or answer some questions you may have, maybe look at a final vote on the rollover requests. And so with that, We talk about future planning. We want to consider the scenarios that Davenport's going to bring that could kind of interrelate with what we would consider year-end surplus, whether this year or future years. We also want to look at maximizing the interest earnings on the $20 million that we have, and that's invested, if you remember, in the local government investment pool that's managed by the state treasurer's office. So that helps us leverage partnerships, grants, implementing strategic borrowing. So all of that is what Davenport's going to review with the board. How do we make the dollar stretch as far as we can in order to accomplish the priorities of the board, whatever we ultimately decide those are. We have some of the board from previous discussion, but of course, those are always a fluid discussion. And so infrastructure development, I know, Mr. Whitlow, you may want to talk a little bit about this. We've talked about this in passing with the board, some planning.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Carter and members of the board. Again, as Mr. Carter noted today, we're not necessarily looking for board action because we know you all are receiving this list for the first time. So we're going to hear from Davenport on Thursday, and it's a list. And as Brian had already noted, much of the capital was restored back to the budget. So a lot of the departmental requests were actually funded the previous 2 months. So as you go through that, as we look ahead, in addition to the $284,000 that are remaining really with the rollover savings and so forth, there are some additional interest dollars that we have not necessarily allocated or appropriated for a specific purpose just yet. Brian mentioned the LGIP, the Local Government Investment Pool. Last year, as part of last year's budget, the board may recall, the board set aside and started an infrastructure development fund in the amount of $600,000. And that was some of our interest earnings and savings, if you will, from the previous fiscal year's budget. We had a discussion regarding some of this, big picture discussion, at our September board planning retreat. We went into a lot of detail, you may recall, regarding the various plans for the county, economic development strategic plan, other plans, and really taking a step back and looking at what the county's been able to do in leveraging dollars that we don't necessarily have anticipated as part of the budget. And we did not anticipate the ARPA funds when the federal government did the infrastructure development funding for the ARPA as a response to COVID. As part of that, the board will recall that allowed us to leverage several $million. $7.7 million was leveraged to deploy broadband projects in Franklin County. That 7.7 allowed the county, we were able to be very strategic and purposeful with those federal dollars because they can only be used for certain things. And the previous boards would remember that. And so we said, hey, we're going to use those ARPA dollars and be very strategic and leverage those dollars to apply for more funding from the state in the forms of VATI. Of course, Mr. Sandy has worked with the Broadband Authority and the board on VATI funding. That $7.7 million then has leveraged us to secure millions of dollars, both from the state, but then also the private sector, to the tune of about $90 million. So $7.7 million local ARPA, if you will, leveraging another 70-some million, if you will, from the private sector and from the state. Very good use of funding, I think many would argue. And so to provide broadband services for our citizen, I know that was a priority of the board and the previous board. In addition to broadband funds was utility infrastructure development. A lot of emphasis on Franklin County specifically to support our infrastructure that will support both commercial and housing development in our designated growth areas in Franklin County. And so in addition to the 7.7, we were able to be very purposeful of another $3 million to leverage with the Western Virginia Water Authority in a 50-50 share, if you will. And so part of that, expanding sewer capacity in the Westlake designated growth area where we're seeing a lot of commercial and housing growth, but then also in the Union Hall Village designated growth area. And then in addition, the 220 North Growth Corridor, and I should say also where the Water Authority has now assumed the utility system in Boones Mill and now the Ferrum Water and Sewer Authority. So
Our designated growth areas, a lot of the infrastructure that was not previously there, I'm saying all this to say, we've now been able to leverage those federal dollars for that purpose. But those federal dollars were one time. There hasn't been a renewal, if you will, of ARPA or a new ARPA. We don't necessarily see that occurring. So for the county to continue, again, to be able to leverage opportunities, whether it be with the Water Authority of a 50% share, it may be through revenue sharing, if you will, for a transportation project through VDOT, where the state of Virginia puts up 50%, the county puts up 50%, and we've improved an intersection, if you will, in a growth area of sorts. Very similar with the Water Authority. And so now that there's strong interest earnings, and I think the board recognized that last year, to set aside $600,000 in this infrastructure development fund, we've been able to continue that from what we were able to do a few years ago with ARPA funds. Most notably, the sewer, Westlake sewer expansions, both at the Bridgewater Plaza area, but then also the utility expansion of the sewer pump station. You have a SUP before the board this evening. What we've been able to do is to expand sewer capacity, almost doubling sewer capacity, not quite, along the US 220 North Growth Corridor. All of those funds have been able to be utilized from that infrastructure development fund. And so that current balance is $238,000. What I'll tell you is we continue to see a lot of interest in our designated growth areas in Franklin County, the 220 North Corridor, Westlake, Union Hall, Ferrum, multiple areas of Franklin County. And so the infrastructure development fund's in place, but we would recommend, and again, not a decision necessarily for today, but in terms of how to utilize these interest earnings, and we've had a chance to speak with Davenport, and Davenport is supportive of this, to replenish that fund, of adding those interest earnings into the infrastructure development fund. And there's about $1.1 million in interest. We were very fortunate with that last year. What I will tell you is, in doing that, those dollars essentially help to expand the tax base. The whole purpose really with our designated growth area, our economic development strategic plan, as we invest, whether it be in water and sewer with the Water Authority, or as we invest in an infrastructure or an intersection improvement, if you will, with VDOT, we're essentially able to then leverage private investment in these areas. And with private investment, of course, is increased real estate, personal property, and business. And so that was a long introduction, Brian. Thank you for this. But we wanted to not go over this today because those earnings are there. And we have an opportunity, again, here that we may not necessarily have in the future. Right now, our interest income is good, as Brian noted earlier. It may be decreasing in future years, and so it's one-time dollars. Those dollars are there, and I'll just pause there to answer any questions before the board. But we wanted to include that in the presentation today, because in a sense, that's in the overall rollover, if you will, in a different category of interest earnings.
Go ahead, Laura.
Mr. Whitlow, I would just reiterate what I believe I reiterated back in the fall. I am strongly supportive of interest earnings supporting our infrastructure reserve account. Just in the activity that's going on in my district, which is really getting to be quite heavy, we must have some available cash to work with, and especially on the 220 corridor as well, and any other opportunities so that we can properly leverage, like we've done with broadband. We've got to have some cash to do that, and so I continue to be very supportive of those interest earnings moving to infrastructure for that reason.
Brian, were these, so the 1.1 million, what account is that? Is that from a different account than from the interest earnings that we were putting directly to balance the budget? Is that a
Correct.
different pot of money, or what is that?
That is, the 1.1 million is in LGIP, and that is earned off of the $20 million from the one-time switch to twice-a-year real estate, separate pot of money. And that is not paid for recurring operations. The interest that we have in recurring operations is really our investment with our deposits with Carter Bank.
And so this is based off of a year?
It is. It would be what was earned during the last fiscal year. So as Mr. Whitlow said, it's kind of a year-end surplus carryover, but it's a different pot of money. Yep.
I would just say, and I've said this before, and county staff has done a good job leveraging dollars for that. I'm a big fan of interest earnings going to capital needs. And I understand this is infrastructure, but it's not county capital. So that would be my only concern.
Anyone else have any questions? Okay, I see a lot of head shaking, so I guess all the questions have been answered.
Okay.
Was that just relative to that last
That
slide or
last
anything?
part, yeah. Now I'm going to open the floor back up for any questions for anything prior.
May I?
Go ahead.
Brian, just for clarification, of course, this is all new data for us.
Yes.
I'm not seeing anything recommended for the sheriff's department. And I'm noticing some language that's called help roll-up or roll-up salaries. I need some idea about the definition of what roll-up means. It's the first time I recall seeing that. So I'd like to get some comment on that, not necessarily today.
Okay.
And on the public safety side, I'm interested in knowing for Thursday, there's some large dollar items there. And I'm interested in knowing if any of these things are going to be time sensitive between now and when we start budgeting for the 25-26 year. Is there any part of those dollars there that we need to consider that has time sensitivity given what the circumstances are within public safety? I know Chief Fowler is working diligently to try to do a lot of things, so I would question that. I don't understand why vacancy savings are set aside. Am I getting that right, that any vacancy savings are not part of the number that is referred to as carryover?
That's correct, and that's been a historical
It's
practice.
historic,
Because
okay.
departments, we get them to confirm their personnel budget, but they really have no discretion in managing that budget. So if they have savings, usually what happens is they have an increased overtime line item, and so it's really not what historically we have done is say, if you have been a good steward of the taxpayer money and managed your budget and had savings, that's what you could request. Well, you don't really manage your personnel. You have vacancies or you don't, but that doesn't necessarily mean you managed anything. It just means you had vacancies during the year.
Those savings are just rolling up to general fund.
They do roll up to general fund, yes.
And the only last question I have, with those exemptions noted earlier in your presentation, social services and CSA, you said are exempted from the conversation, and you don't have to answer me today, but I need to understand why.
They were, they just had to be supplemented from the county. They had no year-end savings. And the county had to supplement to the tune of 6 figures for both of those departments. And so we removed them from the overall calculation to get to $295,000, because otherwise we would have told the board there are no year-end savings and we would not recommend any year-end surplus rollover requests. And CSA, that's not atypical because of the dollar amounts. And social services, we ran into that this year a little bit. And so, but that's the reason why they were removed, is because in any kind of data, they were what we would consider an outlier. They were kind of skewing the year-end surplus savings. So we just removed those so other departments could show their savings and we could make a recommendation for rollover.
Well, of course, I would yield to Mr. Carter. This is,
Yes, ma'am.
he's our board rep, and Mike, I probably stepped into
No,
your...
it's fine. I'm curious about these figures, and I may have to meet with you separate, but
Yes, sir.
if I understand correctly about the DSS budget, the county provides 22% of their budget. Is that correct? And the
They-
rest is state and federal?
They did this past year.
So how did we come up that the county has had to shore them up with this amount of money?
Yeah. A couple of things. So, what has happened is when we base our budget, we estimate what a trend is, And so historically, it's been about 18.5% as the local match. And so for whatever reason, it jumped to 22.5% this year. So that means the county had to supplement more local money that was originally planned to balance social services. We kind of probably need to dig into that, and that's a recommendation for this upcoming budget, because I think we're gonna find as a locality is, as budgets increase, and that typically is what we see just by the nature of inflationary costs, personnel or otherwise, looks like the county is going to start picking up more and more of a local match. And so I don't think historically, we haven't seen that. It's been fairly level. I think we probably need to dig into a little bit more of how the state funds and what that looks like in order to budget better. But there have been some increases over the last couple of years that apparently ticked that up.
Well,
Yes, sir.
I'll just say this for the benefit of the board. In the past 24 months, DSS has taken in the neighborhood of 15 children where they've had to house them within the DSS agency, and it has become very expensive. It requires 2 full-time employees to stay with that child until they can be placed, and I think as of right now, I jotted down some numbers, they've accumulated $80,000 in time paid for these office personnel. It's a total of 87 days for 15 children. And their request, I think, is 30,000, 36,000. I mean, it's a pretty minimal request, and whether or not this board agrees to give them that, I can tell you up front, they're going to get it in the long term anyway, because they're going to have overtime the county's going to have to make up. I'm not very happy with a lot of these cuts, quite frankly, and I'm not willing to vote on it today. I want to hear what Davenport has to say about it. And I go back to where we started all this phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, which we've never done before. September 17th, we put $2 million. We spent $2 million. October 17th, 1.1. I didn't vote for that. And now we're left with $284,000 crumbs to dole out amongst all of this, and I don't agree with it. That's just my comment. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, I don't see anyone else.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have till the work sessions.
Okay. That's the end of Mr. Carter's presentation. At this time, we're going to take about a 10-minute break, and we're going to reconvene back at B75. So
I would make a motion to certify that only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements under the Virginia Freedom of Information Act were heard, discussed, or considered in the closed session to which this certification applies, and only such business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed session was convened were heard, discussed, or considered in the meeting to which this certification applies.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Madam Clerk, will you take a roll call?
Supervisor Smith?
Yes.
Supervisor Quinn?
Yes.
Supervisor Carter?
Yes.
Supervisor Jamison?
Yes.
Supervisor Mitchell?
Yes.
Vice Chair Tatum?
Yes.
And Chairman Thompson is absent for the vote.
All right, thank you. Moving right along to public hearings. Application for special use permit, application of Western Virginia Water Authority applicants and Westlake Real Estate Investment Limited Companies owners requesting a special use permit with possible conditions on approximately 42.45 acres of property zoned B2, General Business District. The vacant parcel is located on Booker T. Washington Highway in the Gills Creek Election District of Franklin County, and further identified by real estate records as tax map parcel 0300000102. For the purpose of this special use permit request is to allow public utilities, sanitary sewer lift station. The property is located in the Westlake Hellsford designated growth area. This property has future land use designation of commercial mixed use. Ms. Cooper, take it away.
Thank you.
Chairman Tatum and members of the board, and for doing the half of my presentation, so maybe I can skip some of it, so that'll be good. Just to let you know, to give you a little bit of background, on October 8th, 2024, the Planning Commission held a public hearing for the conformance review for a public utility for this sanitary sewer lift. And what they were doing, they needed to affirm that this sanitary sewer lift station was in conformance or consistent with the county's comprehensive plans, policies, goals, and strategies pertinent to public utilities. And I'm happy to say that they did, and it was a 7-0 vote. And on October 17th, in your Friday packet, you received a memorandum telling you of the Planning Commission's findings and going into a little bit more detail of that it was in conformance and consistent with the comprehensive plan. So I wanted to start it off with that. That's one less public hearing we had to have this evening. The project, as stated, consists of approximately 0.7476 acres. It's located on a property that is 42.45 acres. As you'll see by the aerial, that most of this property is wooded, and the sanitary sewer lift station will be located to the rear of the property. And there's a diagram to show that, and this lift station will be unmanned. The applicant stated in their letter of application that the proposed lift station will provide more feasible and economic means for the orderly expansion of this public sewer service in a growing area of the county. And I think all of us would agree that the Westlake Hellsford area is growing. You're seeing a lot of special use permits come in front of you. They also indicated that the existing wastewater treatment facility currently serves mixed-use development in and around the town center. And as development increases, the conveyance and pumping capacity in this existing system will be limited. So this is definitely needed. The applicant stated that the proposed addition on the sanitary sewer lift station on the north side of Virginia Route 122, as I said before, this will supply capacity to convey wastewater for the existing and future development. Staff did receive 3 emails in support of the application and 1 call suggesting that if the application is passed, Old Taylor's Road needed to be paved. At the Planning Commission public hearing, there was no speakers for or against. We like to give you a vicinity map of the location. This is the property. You'll notice how wooded, as I said, it was, and it's going back in this area, the lift station. This shows the zoning map. As you can see, the property is zone B2, surrounded by A1 mostly and PCD. This is your future land use of the property. You will notice that this area is the commercial mixed use, the red. The blue is civic open space, and of course across here is Booker T. This is the conceptual plan that was in your packet. As you see, this is where the lift station will be. There will be an access drive, and this is Old Taylor's Road. Analysis, nearby parcels consist of commercial uses, vacant lots, and obviously a national monument. As I stated, the zoning is B2. Properties surrounding, as I stated, are B2 agricultural and PCD. This use will not need a water source, a septic tank, or a drain field. The public utility will be unmanned, so there will be minimum noise to the adjacent properties. Traffic produced by this utility will basically be less than most uses in the area due to the fact that it's unmanned. The sanitary lift station will continue to meet the goals, objectives, and strategies of your comprehensive plan by promoting and improving infrastructure, especially in this case, public sewer, to existing and new development in the Westlake Hellsford designated growth area. The Westlake Hellsford plan supports this public utility and its expansion to promote growth in one of your DGAs. The public utility will, as I've said, have minimal impact on surrounding properties due to being at the back of the property. It will not be visible to most surrounding properties and especially to the national monument. Staff concludes that this proposed use would not be substantially detriment to the properties, not change the character of your zoning district. It would be in harmony and the purpose and the intent of the chapter and with the uses permitted by special use permit in the B2 zoning district. The Planning Commission did hold their public hearing. They voted 7-0 to approve it with 4 conditions. The first one is one that we usually have, that the proposed public utility will be in substantial conformance to the conceptual plan. Number 2 actually has already been done. It had to be in conformance with the county's comprehensive plan. That may be something that the Board of Supervisors might want to remove number 2, or you can leave it. The applicant shall comply with the requirements of Chapter 22 of the Franklin County Code, and the applicant shall submit a site plan and possibly erosion settlement control plan for review by the county prior to construction of the project. I would be glad to answer any questions, and Mr. Kroll is here to give you a brief presentation from Western Virginia Water Authority.
All right, anyone have any questions for Ms. Cooper? See any? Come on up and state your name and affiliation for the record, please.
Good evening. I'm Scott Kroll. I'm Director of Infrastructure Development with the Western Virginia Water Authority. Pleasure to be here, Chairman, supervisors, and staff. I really don't have a presentation. Staff did a great job of giving an overview of the project, and I'm just happy to answer any additional questions that you might have.
All right, anyone have any questions?
Great. Thank you.
Okay, at this time, we'll open the floor for public comment on this issue. Madam Clerk, do we have anyone?
I have no one signed up.
Okay, is there anyone here that would like to speak to the board in regard to this issue? Okay, seeing none, we will close the public comment session. Board, what's your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman, if there are no inquiries from the supervisors, I would pause for that.
Okay.
If there are any
anyone?
questions,
I don't see
I
any.
would offer a motion.
Okay, go ahead.
I find that the use will not be of substantial detriment to adjacent properties, that the character of the zoning district will not be changed thereby, and that such use will be in harmony with the uses permitted by right in the zoning district and with the public health, safety, and general welfare of the community. Therefore, I move to recommend approval of the applicant's request for a special use permit to allow for a public utility sanitary sewer lift station on property with the 4 conditions as recommended by the Planning Commission.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further comment or discussion before we call for a final vote? Okay, seeing none, Madam Clerk, will you take a roll call?
Supervisor Quinn?
Yes.
Supervisor Smith?
Yes.
Supervisor Jamison?
Yes.
Supervisor Mitchell?
Yes.
Supervisor Carter?
Yes.
Vice Chair Tatum?
Yes.
And Chairman Thompson is absent for the vote.
All right. Moving on along to our second hearing tonight. This hearing is an application for a special use permit filed by Glade Hill Land Company, LLC. The owners are Charles and Deborah Perdue. The subject of this application is to allow for wood storage on property on Vineyard Road. Ms. Cooper?
Yes, thank you. Sorry, I was getting my papers
Okay.
together there.
I shortened my intro a little on that one.
That's fine. I have to, we had, staff and I had it out of order there a little bit. Sorry
Okay.
about that.
Take your time.
Just to start out with a little bit of background on this property, some of you may remember, in 2018, the Board of Supervisors approved a special use permit for Glade Hill Land Company for the purpose of a wood storage yard on approximately 3.5 acres of a 25.805 acre parcel, and it was identified as tax map number 06500002601. The Planning Department received complaints that Glade Hill Land Company was in violation of their special use permit approved by the Board of Supervisors in 2018. After research, the county staff, it was determined by the zoning administrator that there were violations of the special use permit, some of the conditions. A violation letter was sent out on October 23rd of 2023, and another notice was sent out July 15th, 2024, and that's how we're here today. Work is being performed outside of the boundaries of the special use permit that was approved by you all in 2018. So from that determination of it being operated outside of the boundaries, approximately 9.61 acres, it's 2 parcels. They're identified as 6527.1 and 65.201.600. As stated before, the special use permit was approved for the 1 parcel that I talked about previously. My determination was that the 2 parcels to come into compliance needed to come back for y'all's approval. In addition, the Board of Zoning Appeals has held a public hearing on Tuesday, October 1st of 2024 to determine if the zoning administrator had made the correct, was correct in her violation letter that the Glade Hill Land Company was in violation of the conditions of the special use permit that it was approved by you in 2018. The Board of Zoning Appeals took the request to table that until we had the public hearing to see what the board decided about those 2 parcels. And that will be taken up at the December 4th meeting of the Board of Zoning Appeals. This property is zoned A1 agricultural, which does allow wood storage by a special use permit. The property is accessed off of Vineyard Road, which is State Route 763. Staff received 1 walk-in inquiring about the application, 3 letters in opposition to this application, and at the Planning Commission public hearing, 1 attorney spoke against the special use permit. We'd like to give you a vicinity map of where the location is. This is obviously Vineyard Road, and this is the special use permit from 2018. This is the boundary that you are hearing the special use permit on. It's these 2 parcels. And this gives you an aerial view of the operation of the business of how it is today. This is your zoning map, so you'll notice that it's surrounded by A1, but you do have a little of residential multifamily here. I'm not sure why, because it's single family in this area, but in 1988, it was considered to be multifamily. This is your future land use map. And you will notice that a lot of the property is in agricultural, rural residential. But this line right here is part of the village of Glade Hill. So this is actually in part of the village. Because just to remind you, the comprehensive plan, it's at an intersection. We do a radius, and this is the radius because we have not we have not completed a plan for the Glade Hill Village. This is a conceptual plan that was submitted by the applicant. You will see the property that we are talking about is this property right here, and then this little property right here. The applicant has consistently used the subject property for the same use, a private wood storage log yard, and has been conducting on these 2 tax parcel numbers since and prior to 2018 when the special use permit was submitted. The subject property many years ago was used as a sawmill. Before being used as a wood storage log yard. The comprehensive plan does support the use in this location and is located within a designation for multiple uses. Staff believes that the request for the special use permit is consistent with the goals and objectives of the comprehensive plan, just as it was in 2018. The closest residence to the property is 900 feet west. Off-site impacts such as noise and view should have no negative impacts to the surrounding properties. You'll see some of the conditions. One of them was placed on the 2018. We carried it over to this one to keep part of the existing wooded buffer. The wood trucks that are using the state road for this business, which could be seen as a large number of commercial vehicles using a secondary road. However, this business has been in this location for years, and I have to be honest, I don't know of any complaints dealing with the commercial vehicles driving up and down the road by the residents that live there. The nearby homes, most of it is dense woods. Parcels to the north and the east are currently vacant. Therefore, staff concludes that the proposed use would be in harmony with the surrounding area in accordance with the current future land use map for the county. Also, I wanted to add for some of the analysis before we get into the Planning Commission recommendation. There's been a lot of discussion about the erosion settlement control and stormwater and who is responsible for what. So I kind of wanted to take a little bit just to explain. The existing business, the existing wood storage business as it exists today, has a general permit for stormwater discharge. And in this case, it's done by DEQ because it's done by the day-to-day operations of the industry, which is considered wood storage log yard. The permit happened to be renewed this year. It was renewed July 1st of 2024. It will expire July 30th of 2029. It spells out in the document, which is quite a few pages, what has to be done, like water testing, monitoring. It's controlling whatever is being run off of the property. That's what's in place today. In 2018, it's been talked about the erosion and settlement control. The coordinator at the time looked at evidence and said that what was already graded was fine. It was existing. He was not going to make them get an erosion settlement control permit from our office. And the person that does the coordinating position now agrees with the past. So this is what could happen in the future. In the future, if Glade Hill Land Company expands, meaning they start moving dirt, pulling out stumps, expanding their business, not just putting logs on grass, but moving the physical earth, they would be subject to regulations that are in our erosion settlement control and stormwater management ordinance, where they would have to more than likely get an E&S permit, and if they disturb over an acre, they would have to have a stormwater permit. We deal with the construction and the moving of the dirt. Once that would be completed, then DEQ would amend this permit and take over again after the construction was done. So I hope that kind of explains the E&S and stormwater and how it works between DEQ and our office. And I'd be glad to answer any questions after we finish the presentation. So your Planning Commission did hold their public hearing. They did place 4 conditions with a vote of 7-0. The first one is the special use permit authorized the existing wood storage operation as depicted on the conceptual plan that I showed you from Earth Environmental and Civil dated April 4th, 2020. A site plan shall be prepared for the current operation and approved by the county zoning administrator. The plan shall be prepared and contained all information required as specified in Section 25-670 of the Franklin County Code, including indications of areas for loading and unloading, ingress and egress of the property, vegetation screening, as well as storage areas, all of which shall be outside of the right-of-way easement. A 15-foot existing vegetative buffer shall be maintained along the eastern and northern property boundaries of tax map number 0650201-600 along the eastern boundary property of tax parcel 065 000-520, and the southern boundary of 065-000-5300. Also, in the event of expansion beyond the existing special use permit, an additional special use permit will be required. So in other words, if other land is bought and the business expands, then they would have to get another special use permit. And I would be glad to answer any questions at this time, and I think the applicant, Mr. Ferguson, has a presentation.
All right, anyone have any questions? Go ahead, Nick.
Lisa, can you go back to that previous slide?
Which one?
Right there.
Okay.
Can you tell me in condition 2 and 3, the end of condition 2 has including indications of area loading, vegetative screening. Can you explain to me that last part of condition 2, starting from including indications of the areas for loading and unloading, ingress and egress of the property, vegetative screening, as well as storage areas, all of which shall be outside of the right-of-way easement?
Okay, so when they do a site plan, what we're asking is they show us how they get in and out of the property. They show us where they're going to be operating the property. They show us the screening that's going to be done. And then they, one of the things is a little wood loading and unloading area that is specified to be shown on the site plan.
So go back to the other one.
Sorry. Oops.
I guess but that vegetative screening is the same as the vegetative buffer in condition 3, right?
It is. The condition 3 just makes it, meaning that you have to keep 15 feet of it in case the business would ever expand. They can't go 15 feet into that screening. So in other words, if, let's say one day they decide that they need more area back here, then they would have to keep a 15-foot buffer. Well, the other special use permit goes into this area, and then this one, you have to keep the 15-foot buffer here. And the old permit, I think goes, I don't have it with me, but I think it goes right here for a 15-foot buffer. So you still have screening from the adjoining properties if the business ever expands.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any questions?
I have
Go ahead.
a question. Lisa, if you clarify a couple things for me.
Sure.
On page 3 of the Planning Commission transmittal at the beginning of our packet, down halfway, it says that Mr. Ferguson stated that loading actually happens on 3 parcels in question. Is that a typo?
That loading happens
The
on 3 parcels?
3 versus 2.
It could be, or when it was being talked, I mean, the whole business is on 3 parcels. So the loading does happen on the initial 2018 special use permit, and it also happens on the 2 that are in question today.
So that's
So-
how you get to the 3?
That's how you would get to the 3. Now, it could be a typo, but that would be what I would think was the intent.
Okay, and the only other question I have, just for my study of this matter, my takeaway from this is that the 2018 special use permit, and then there was, I think, a subsequent adjudication through the court about the right-of-way, was basically in play, and the court determined that the right-of-way should be clear, open, and accessible. But my takeaway overall is that there was an assumption from the 2018 SUP that included 2 parcels, versus the one that the actual SUP addressed, and that this SUP is coming in on the back end of that to kind of set the record straight that it's actually the 2 parcels versus 1. Now, is my assumption on that correct?
Dealing with the right-of-way only or getting it into
2
compliance?
separate issues there.
To get it into compliance, we're dealing with the two that we're talking about this evening. Dealing with the right-of-way, you would still, the court case, and I wasn't at the court hearings, but it's my understanding that there is a right-of-way that goes through here, and Vineyard goes so far, and then there is a easement to get back to this back parcel. And that would be probably on these 2 properties. Because I think I have it with me, the survey for where Vineyard Road ends and begins.
So
Does that answer your question, or?
I wanted to add just a little bit to what Lori's questioning. So the original SUP was for the 25.8 acres that is owned by the Gardeners. There are 2 additional parcels, so there'll be 3 together.
Right.
And the 2 additional parcels are owned by the Purdue's, and they're subject to the SUP tonight. So the first SUP done in 2018 covered the property that was already owned by the Gardeners. It's the 25.8 acres. The SUP tonight covers the other 2 parcels that are owned by the Purdue family, but leased by the Gardeners for this operation.
Yes.
Okay.
He probably explained it a lot better than I did.
That's a good clarification. And so for purposes of this SUP that's before us tonight for a vote, the right-of-way is it a non-issue with regard, because does the court standing on that kind of carry the day, or does that come into play with tonight's decision?
In my opinion, and our county attorney can weigh on it, in my opinion, you are here for the SUP for the Woods storage yard, that the right-of-way issue is totally separate.
That's my takeaway.
But
Okay.
if you want more interpretation from the county attorney, I'm sure he could give it to you in more detail.
Mr. Gwynn, am I correct? Yes, ma'am. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Vice Chair.
Anyone
Lisa,
else have any questions?
Yeah, I have one
Go
more.
ahead.
Lisa, just as a point of clarification, so they'll prepare a site plan for you, which just uses a portion of these 3 properties. It doesn't use the whole amount of the 3 properties. And you mentioned that if they wanted to expand the business and buy another piece of property, they would have to get an SUP. Actually, if they wanted to expand the business and go beyond the footprint of the site plan they're preparing, they would have to get an SUP, not just purchasing property, right? I just wanted to clarify that point with you.
The SUP, it depends on the SUP on this, the 2 that we're talking about tonight, we included the whole acreage.
Okay.
What was not included is the 2018. It was only for this area. So on the 2018, they would have to go back and get a special use permit. And thank you, because I did misspoke.
Okay.
I was talking about the 2 for this evening.
Okay, thank you.
So the 2,000, so in this area, if they would expand, they have to, but we included all the acreage for the 2 parcels that they're leasing from the Purdue's.
Thanks, Dan.
Yep.
I don't think anyone has any questions for Ms. Cooper. Does the applicant want to speak to this, or a representative?
I'm sure he does.
Come on up.
Sorry.
Sorry, thank you, Lisa.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Board of Supervisors, good to see you this evening. My name is Eric Ferguson. I'm here on behalf of Glade Hill Land Company and Clark's and Charles and Deborah Purdue, who are the applicants here. I'm an attorney here in Rocky Mount with the law firm of Ferguson and Naff, and had the pleasure of appearing before you all back in 2018 on these same matters. I would like to pass out to you all, if I could, some emails and some site plans, which I think would help us understand the reason that we're here tonight.
Give it to the clerk and she'll pass them out.
I don't want to belabor this point, Mr. Chairman, but we're here just as a, I don't want to just say a housekeeping matter, but we are here asking for a special use permit on these two parcels that have been identified as not having been included in the original special use permit. Without going through all of the history again, I will just comment that this property, including on the two parcels that are here tonight, have always been used by Glade Hill Land Company for this wood storage in this log yard. And most of it had been also used as a sawmill earlier, and I'm sure the county records would indicate there used to be a county landfill on the Purdue property as well. But we are here on these lots primarily because the county planning staff determined that there had been some violations of the special use permit, which included, as they indicated tonight, that they were operating outside of the boundaries of the initial special use permit, as well as having no site plan approved. That's what started all of this, and so that's the reason we made an appeal to the BZA as well as filing the applications here. The outside of the boundaries, you will notice, if you would, on number one, the first handout that I handed you that was there, the reason that my clients believed that it had been grandfathered was an exchange of emails prior to getting this done. I think we've taken the liberty of highlighting there on that original email in 2018 and an exchange between our engineer as well as the county staff that had referred to it as a grandfathered sawmill operation. So that was the reasoning, and based on the discussions that they had in pre-submission back in 2018, that they believed that there was no need to include that parcel in the special use permit. So right or wrong, that was the basis for the belief that they didn't have to include it. And so if you would, if just keep that in mind, and then you will also notice in the item number 2 that I have delivered or handed to you, as well as item number 3, you will see that in the site plans that were submitted, or the conceptual plans, whatever you want to call them, also indicate this business being operated on those two parcels that we're here on tonight. So when the county staff, which did a good report, a very thorough report, says that it has been consistently used for these purposes, it has been. And so my clients have believed that they had the right to extend the business over onto these parcels, as you can see by the plans that they did submit. So the only problem that I take with the county's or the planning staff's report is in saying that there was no site plan submitted. There were 2 site plans submitted. The first one was not sufficient, and you will see in the emails with number 3 that they were asked to provide additional information, including the loading areas on the site plan, which they did, which then brings us to number 4. The only response from the county planning staff at that point in time was just give us larger plats. 2 copies of 24 by 36, please, which they also provided, and that is the site plan that is attached to the back of number 4. So my clients have consistently attempted to comply with those terms, and I believe they have, which would also be indicative of their consistent use of this property in accordance with the original special use permit in 2018. Besides that, I would just say to you, both of these tracts are being used as they have been. I believe the county staff report indicates that this is consistent with the comprehensive plan. It's also consistent with the use of other properties in the neighborhood. I think it's important to note that even though there were some letters submitted in opposition to this, that no one has ever complained to the county about traffic which would seem to be one of the main issues with that use. But no one has ever complained about that. In fact, none of the agencies that you all generally rely upon for input on these kinds of measures, none of them even made a comment about this. And so I would just ask you to consider the report that's been provided to you by county staff. The Planning Commission heard this and voted unanimously to recommend approval of the special use permit to you. And so that's why we're here tonight. And I don't know if I can shed any further light on any of the issues that anyone has raised, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. I would ask that you approve this special use permit. And I believe, Ms. Smith, I wanted to respond to your inquiry. I believe the initial special use permit included 2 phases of the use of this property by Glade Hill Land Company. I don't think they have to come back for a special use permit as long as they stay within the bounds of those first 2 phases. As Mr. Quinn indicated, I believe, if they expand beyond that, even into their other 25 acres or onto the 9 acres that Mr. Perdue owns, they would have to come back
Yes, I
for a
understand
special
that.
use.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Any other question? And I would ask Mr. Tatum that I might have an opportunity to respond if anyone brings up any new information
Okay.
and
All right. Anyone have any
comments.
questions for Mr. Ferguson?
I just have one more question.
Go ahead.
Mr. Ferguson, I understand there was a DEQ citation issued last spring. Has that been remediated?
To my knowledge, there's been no further action taken by DEQ against anyone. I know that there was an issue with the Perdues regarding the shingle. There had been a shingle dump on the 9-acre parcel. That has now been remediated,
It has
to
been.
my knowledge.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Anyone else? Okay, I don't see anyone, but if something comes up, I'll.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. We'll open the floor for public comment on this. Madam Clerk, do we have anyone signed up?
I have no one signed up.
Okay, is there anyone here that would like to speak in regard to this issue? Come on up.
My name's John Boynton, and I represent Paisley Law. I'm an attorney here in Rocky Mount. The Paisley Law has a right-of-way over from the end of Vineyard Road to his property that goes over both the Perdue property on the right side and the Glade Hill Land Company property that this logging or wood storage facility is located on. In June of 2017 or thereabouts, Glade Hill Land Company bought this parcel of land from Paisley Law's brother and moved their wood storage operation to the parcel. They did so in complete disregard to the existing easement that Paisley Law had for the benefit of his property. The county then issued a notice of violation because at that time they had no special use permit, so they were in violation of your zoning ordinance in their operation. So recognizing that, they came and asked for your forgiveness in 2018 to give them special use permit. The use of the right-of-way was contested at that point. There was already a pending court action against Glade Hill Land Company for destroying the farm road. The board included in its special use permit a condition that loading, unloading, vegetative screening, well, basically loading, unloading, and storage areas shall be outside of any, and you said legal right-of-way in there because you didn't take a position of whether Glade Hill Land Company told you that he didn't have a right-of-way. We told you that he did. Later on, the court told everybody that he did have a right-of-way going through there, and that was done in August of 2019. So they got the permit in May of 2018. They continued to operate in violation of their permit because of their interference with Paisley Law's right-of-way. I have a series of pictures. I'll kind of point them out to you. Here is the right-of-way with a piece of equipment blocking it. Here is a gate across the state road going into the property with the piece of equipment inside the road. Here is what is supposed to be a road. You can see it's torn all to pieces by heavy equipment. It's made basically impassable. Here's another view going into Paisley Laws over what is supposed to be a road. There is no road. It's been destroyed. Here is stakes that VDOT put up to indicate the end of the state road. Oh, pass that over. Here is a watered down plat that VDOT did, and the reason I'm showing you that is because here is the metal gate on Vineyard Road. Here is the end of the right-of-way of Vineyard Road. And here is the little office building that is on the Purdue property that Glade Hill Land Company uses as an office. Here on the left side is a combination of two lots of this Deer Hill Estate subdivision. That's important because Glade Hill Land Company was told to get the gate that they installed off of the state road. They didn't do that. To this date, they haven't done that. So they continue to obstruct the state road. They continue to put log storage and load and unload inside of the Paisley Law right-of-way. Totally ignored that. So they've been in violation of their zoning, of their special use permit since May of 2018, since it was issued. In October of 2023, Franklin County notified Glade Hill Land Company of a violation of the special use permit. No corrective action was taken. No appeal was made to the BZA. DEQ got involved with their violation of their regulations. In July of 2024, the county again noticed Glade Hill Land Company of the same violations that were noticed in the first, which includes being outside or inside the right-of-way area. Now they come back to you and ask for expanding their operation. Essentially, they're asking you again for forgiveness for previous violations. It's also important to point out, I know I'm running short, but it's also important to point out that Deer Hill Estates is a single-family residential subdivision. It has property restrictions that restrict its use to single-family residential. The land on the left, the smaller parcel owned by Purdue, is a part of that subdivision. They are now asking you to grant them a special use permit for a use that is prohibited by their own property restrictions. Essentially, join with me, give me permission to violate the property restrictions of my deed. So we continue to fight the battle of the interference of the right-of-way. Board member Smith inquired about whether there were one or two issues. They are cousins to one another. There may be two issues, but they are certainly cousins, because the requirement in the special use permit that the use of that the storage operation be conducted outside of any legal right-of-way means exactly that. So if you ignore the right-of-way, you're ignoring the condition, which means not only are you violating our rights as an easement holder, you're violating the county's conditional use permit. So for reasons not related to your functions as a legislative body, you're being asked tonight to give preferential treatment to one property owner to the detriment of another property owner. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I have no one else signed up.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak to the board in regard to this issue? Okay, seeing none. Ferguson, if you want to come on up, board, did that generate any questions that you have for Mr. Ferguson?
Not for me.
If you want to take
Can I just have just a few minutes, Mr.
a
Chairman?
few minutes.
Can this be turned on? I don't know how to turn it
Yes.
on. While she's doing that, just want to, the issue of this right-of-way has been beaten to death, and the only reason that it keeps coming up is that when Mr. Law's family divided up their family property down there, he didn't get a right-of-way. His brothers and sisters didn't deed him one. And so to say that his right-of-way has been violated by my clients is just totally not true. We've been in court. Judge Perdue originally found that all he had was a farm road. We've come back and they've taken another second bite. All we've done is fight in court and before agencies over this matter. And the last time, the judge blankly told them they have a right-of-way, but he also said in letter that the Glade Hill Land Company could load and unload trucks in the right-of-way as long as they didn't block it and prevent Mr. Law from passing through. I would just like to show you this photograph. This photograph is a picture of the log yard and Mr. Law's right-of-way, which he's clearly using, not being obstructed. You see that white pickup truck pulling those rolls of hay through there. So his right-of-way is not being obstructed. And here's just another photograph showing the same thing. And not only is his hay man getting through there, but you can see his truck or somebody working for him right here passing through the right-of-way. No one is obstructing Mr. Law from using the right-of-way. He keeps on beating that horse. Here's county aerial photographs from 2002 that show, I'm not even sure that you can tell if there's a right-of-way across the property. This right over here is the property that we're here on tonight, the 9-acre parcel. What's there, you can see, that's 2002. Here's the county aerial maps from 2006. I'm not sure that you can identify a roadway through there then. Looks like some grass from the photograph. Here is 2017. You begin to see some semblance of a roadway through here along this line, which you can see the logs all stacked around. It's not obstructed, nothing happening to prevent him from using it. Here is the county aerial map from 2019, which was after the first special use permit was approved, and to suggest that he's been blocked or obstructed since then is simply not shown even by the aerial photograph, which shows that the right-of-way remains open. It's just simply more complaining by Mr. Law. He's the only one that shows up. He files suits. He makes complaints to DEQ. He does everything that he can to stop this project. And Glade Hill Land Company's been nothing but a good neighbor. They've complied with, if there haven't been any citations from DEQ or anyone else, they've kept the roadway open. It's not obstructed. They use it because they've been allowed to use it, but it's not blocked. He gets back and forth. I didn't bring it up here, but I've even got photographs where they take the gates off of the roadway in the back, leaving Glade Hill Land Company. His people go through, take Glade Hill Land Company's gates off, throw them on the ground, and don't put them back. It's just bad between them, but it's certainly nothing to prohibit the granting of this special use permit.
Thank you. All right. One last time, anyone here that will want to speak to the board in regard to this issue? Okay, seeing none, we'll close the floor to public comment. Board, what's your pleasure?
So, Tim, I'd like to make a couple
Go
comments.
ahead.
As part of the due diligence on the special use permit, I talked to both of the gardeners. I also did a site visit, and I talked to Mr. Law, both talked to him, plus I had a number of texts. And coming out of this, there were 3 concerns I had that were worthy of consideration for a condition. The first one was around the right-of-way, which we've discussed extensively tonight. And my hope in going forward is that the gardeners would honor the right-of-way. However, I don't believe that it's the jurisdiction of the county or the Board of Supervisors to manage that right-of-way or enforce the right-of-way. So I don't feel that the right-of-way is worth a condition to this SUP. The second thing I wanted to mention is regarding the DEQ violation. So I was able to get a copy of the letter of violation that was issued this past spring, read it, understand it. And the issue was that there was a pile of wood pieces from timber and also shingles, some of which were probably left over from the old landfill days. It was important to me that we determined that that violation was cleared. Lisa tried to get in touch with DEQ but didn't get a response. So I was able to determine that Carl and Randall Cundiff were the 2 people that went on site and did the cleanup. Carl and Randall work for me, so I know them very well. So I called Carl Cundiff to confirm that he actually went on site and cleaned up all the wood and shingle debris. So I feel that that violation has been satisfied. And so I don't feel that that is worth a condition. The third thing that I considered for a condition was the erosion and sediment control. And as Lisa mentioned, that's under the jurisdiction of DEQ, and they've been issued a permit for that. And so, in my opinion, we should not have a condition for erosion and sediment control. And so I just wanted to share with you what I had done outside of what's in writing here, some extra work and knowledge for both the board and the people that you're in attendance. That's all I have.
Anyone else have any questions or comments, thoughts?
I spoke to both parties and went to the site visit as well. My concern was also erosion. But Lisa and staff have made it pretty clear in my conversations that that's a DEQ matter. I also agree with Dan that a right-of-way issue is out of our purview. That was handled in the court, and I would suggest that maybe we make some amendments to this to these conditions. I feel like we're dabbling in things we shouldn't be in. Condition 2, I think, should stop it. Required as specified in section 25-670 of the Franklin County Code. The right-of-way and everything that's deeded, that's out of our control. I don't think we should be meddling in that.
Nick, the only comment I would make to that is it's only in the plan that they would show that their operation would be outside of the right-of-way. It doesn't discuss enforcement of that right-of-way in the future, and so that's why I was okay with it being in just the plan, the site plan. That's what the condition number 2 talks about.
Anything else? All right, what's your pleasure on it? Go ahead.
I would make a motion. I find that such use will not be of substantial detriment to adjacent property, that the character of the zoning district will not be changed thereby, and that such use will be in harmony with the purpose and intent of the county code, with the uses permitted by right in the zoning district, and with the public health, safety, and general welfare to the community. Therefore, I move to recommend approval of the applicant's request for a special use permit to allow for a wood storage log yard in accordance with section 25-179 of the zoning ordinance, with the 4 conditions as recommended in the staff report.
Okay, do we have a second?
A second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion before I call for a final vote? Madam Clerk, will you take a roll call?
Supervisor Jamison?
Yes.
Supervisor Mitchell?
Yes.
Supervisor Carter?
Yes.
Supervisor Smith?
Yes.
Supervisor Quinn?
Yes.
Vice Chair Tatum?
Yes.
And Chairman Thompson is absent for the vote.
All right. Okay, finally, moving on to our next public hearing. We'll have this public hearing is an application filed by Seth and Brittany Sigmund seeking to allow expansion of an existing building at the corner of Redwood Road and Old Franklin Turnpike for sales, services, and repairs of automobiles, trucks, etc. Ms. Cooper.
Yes. If you could give me just a second.
Got it.
Whoops. I think I went a little bit too far. Okay. Thank you, Chairman Tatum, members of the board. This is your last public hearing for this evening. This is an application for a special use permit. The applicant is trying to expand his business, and it's located at 3145 Old Franklin Turnpike. He would like to construct a 30 by 60 garage with a lean for his existing business. He has a lot of business and he needs more garage space. There is already an entrance to this property on Redwood Road, which leads to the rear of the business. There is also an entrance on Old Franklin Turnpike that goes back to the business. The applicant submitted a land use and building permits to the Planning and Building Department. At this point in time, only a portion of the permit could be issued, and that was the garage due to the zoning of the parcel behind the business. You'll see that the business is on a B2 parcel, and the parcel behind is an A1, which caused us not to be able to let him do the lean-to because he couldn't meet the setbacks. So we gave several options to him, and he decided that after consulting with staff that his best option was to apply for the special use permit for sales, service, and repair of autos, trucks, and recreational vehicles and motorcycles. So like I have stated before, the business is at 3145 Old Virginia Turnpike. It is Zone B2, general business. And what you're doing tonight is the property behind it is A1. So the special use permit is for the property behind it, so that he would be able to construct his lean-to. I did want to mention that there are businesses around in this area. There's another service and repair shop that's been there for a while. There's another business in the surrounding area. Staff received one phone call inquiring about the application, and at the Planning Commission public hearing, there was one citizen to speak concerning the special use permit. He was wanting to know if it was for all of the 14 acres, but it isn't. I'll be showing you a conceptual plan of what the special use permit, if approved by you, will be for. We like to give you a vicinity map of where it's located. We like to give you a picture, an aerial picture, So when we're talking about this property, the existing business is right here. There's a single-family home in front of it. The existing business is back here on this B2 property. The property in question is this A1 property that is 14 acres. And you'll see with conditions that were put on by the Planning Commission, this line right here would be vacated. But when you look at the conceptual plan, we'll be talking about this area. So here's the zoning map. So here's the B2. This is the A1 where the special use permit is being applied for tonight. So we wanted to give you the future land use map. And this is, excuse me. Sorry about that. Sorry, excuse me. It's located in the commercial highway corridors. So you do find businesses, obviously, in this corridor. Excuse me, sorry about that. This is the conceptual plan. So again, here is the existing garage. Here is the permitted, it's under construction, the extension to the garage. Here is the lean-to on the A1 property, which is causing us to be here tonight for the special use permit for the sales, repair, and service of automobiles, et cetera. Analysis. The applicant has an existing business of service and repair of autos. Like we have stated, he wants to expand with a garage and a lean-to to the rear of the property. Because of zoning and setbacks, the lean-to could not be constructed. The expansion of this business would not be substantially detrimental to the adjacent properties because the business is already in existence. It's been there for a while. It is not anticipated for more noise to be generated than what is already exists on the property. The expansion of the business will probably generate maybe a little more traffic. If you've been by, he is very busy. But not generate enough to cause burden to other properties, the traffic. There are other small commercial businesses, as I stated, along the area with some residential dwellings, which you will find on major corridors. And usually these commercial businesses help service the surrounding residential properties and the surrounding area. The special use permit would be in harmony with the purpose and the intent of this district and the service and repair of vehicles that is already being conducted. It will not change the character of the district because the business is already there. The comprehensive plan would support this commercial use as a standard and expect this type throughout areas of the county. And particularly this type of use provide community-oriented service to the community. Staff suggests there will be minimum impacts of this business, and granting the special use permit would not change the character of the A1 zoning district because the use would be in harmony with other uses. The Planning Commission did hold their public hearing. They voted to approve 7-0 with 2 conditions. The proposed use shall be developed in substantial conformance to the conceptual plan titled Seth and Brittany Sigmund, SPEC 08-10806, dated October 8th, 2024, prepared by the owner and applicant. The property line between the 2 parcels, the B2 and A1, will be vacated. And the special use permit that you are having a public hearing on is for this area right here on this conceptual plan, not the area behind that is wooded that the Sigmunds own. And I would be glad to answer any questions, and Mr. Sigmund is here also to answer any questions.
You want to have any questions for Ms. Cooper?
I just have a quick
Go
one.
ahead.
Lisa, is this a procedural question because of another case I've got in front of me that you're well aware of? When this property line gets vacated, how does that become a matter of permanent record? Does it go over to the court and that gets attached to the deed, or how does that work?
What will happen is, if the board approves the special use permit, Mr. Sigmund can vacate this line either by deed or plat or both.
Okay.
And whatever he chooses to do, once once the planning department has approved it, then it will be recorded in the clerk of courts and become record.
Okay, thank you.
But the zoning will stay the same. The property, you'll see B2 and A1.
It's just a boundary
It's
vacation.
just getting ready of the vacation for him to be able to finish construction what he needs for his
Thank you.
business.
Thank you very much.
All right. Anyone else have anything for Ms. Cooper? Thank you, Lisa. Would the applicant like to speak? State your name and address for the record, please.
Good evening, Chairman, Board, staff. My name is Seth Sigmund. I'm the owner and operator of the business. As you can see, we're kind of crowded there, so in today's time, it's kind of hard to get parts. So sometimes we're leaving vehicles sitting in the shop long periods of time and putting us outside working on vehicles sometimes, and the weather's not very well. So we're just asking for the special use permit to add on to be able to be inside and work on more vehicles.
All right. Anyone have any questions for Mr. Sigmund? Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Okay, we'll open the floor for public comment. Madam Clerk, do we have anyone signed up? Is there anyone here that would like to speak to the board in regard to this issue? Okay, seeing none, we'll close the floor for public comment. Board, what's your pleasure?
I'll offer a motion whenever you're ready, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Make sure I'm on the right one here. I find that the use will not be of substantial detriment to adjacent properties, that the character of the zoning district will not be changed thereby, and that such use will be in harmony with the uses permitted by right in the zoning district and with the public health, safety, and general welfare to the community. Therefore, I move to recommend approval of the applicant's request for a special use permit to allow for expansion of the existing building for sale, service, and repair of automobiles, trucks, recreational vehicles, and motorcycles at this location with the two conditions that staff already put forward.
All right, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion before we call for a final vote? Okay, Madam Clerk, you take a roll call.
Supervisor Mitchell?
Yes.
Supervisor Carter?
Yes.
Supervisor Smith?
Yes.
Supervisor Quinn?
Yes.
Supervisor Jamison?
Yes.
Vice Chair Tatum?
Yes.
And Chairman Thompson is absent for the vote.
All right. And that does it for those. Appointments. Anyone have any committee appointments that they would like to make at this time?
I do, Mr. Chair.
Okay, go
It'd be the
ahead.
pleasure of the board. I have one that I'm going to defer to December for ag development, but I do have an appointment to put before the board for my planning commissioner from Gills Creek. She is in the middle of a term, and this would be for her unexpired term. She is having to resign for personal family issues, and I have identified and interviewed Ron Jefferson for this appointment, and I would like to put his name forward in the form of a motion to be appointed to complete the unexpired term of Cheryl Eggy for the Gills Creek Planning Commission.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on this. All in favor, let me know. Oh. Yeah. when-
Thank you for that.
Yes.
Term to begin January 1st,
Okay.
2025. Thanks,
All right.
Steve.
Now, all in favor, let me know by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. None opposed. Anyone else?
I have one, Mr. Chairman. It's to appoint Carl Thomas Klein Jr. To serve on the, I forgot what we're appointing for, the Patrick Henry Community College Board.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to appoint Carl Klein to the Patrick Henry Community College Board. Any further discussion before I call for a vote? All in favor, let me know by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Anyone else?
Mr. Chairman, how do we want to handle this applicant for STEP, since it's a Boone's Mill appointment?
Is it an open position?
Yes. been open for a while.
Mr. Whitlow, could you contact Mr. Thompson on that? And
Yes.
if necessary, we could, if you can get his feedback on that, maybe we can address that Thursday. If not, at our December 12th meeting.
Sure, I can do that. I don't think it's district-specific, but I think maybe the applicant is from the district. That's the way I read
I
that.
think the applicant is from Boonville, but the board seat is not district.
Okay, it's not a
that's right.
district specific.
That's correct.
but I can get
given
some-
that he's a Boonville resident, I just want it to be in
Okay.
consideration of Chairman Thompson.
I can follow up.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? All right. Ladies and gentlemen, we have reached the time set aside in our meeting for public comment. Public comment gives citizens an opportunity to address the board in person or in writing on matters appropriate to the responsibilities of the board. Each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes for their comments. Speakers must direct all comments to the board as a whole and not to individual board members or employees of the board or county. Personal attacks or insulting, profane, or vulgar language will not be tolerated. Likewise, commentary on issues that are not within the purview of the board and that are not a function of local government and over which we have no control are not acceptable. Public comment is not a question and answer session, and board members will not answer questions during public comment. If a speaker violates these rules, the chair may rule the speaker out of order, and upon a second violation, have the speaker removed from the podium. Madam Clerk, do we have anyone signed up?
No, sir.
Okay, is there anyone here that hasn't signed up that would like to speak to the board? Okay, seeing none, we will close the floor for public comment. Moving on, before we go into other matters for supervisors, I wanted to give Mr. Gwynn and Mr. Whitlow a chance to catch up where we skipped over them earlier today. Mr. Gwynn, do you have anything for the board?
Well, I didn't, but I've been thinking about it as I sat here. In our action there on the Glade Hill Land Company, condition number 2, the last part of it talks about all of which shall be outside the right of way / easement. And I wonder if there might be any interest in the board, certainly under the parliamentary procedure, a motion to reconsider is appropriate, since all of you voted in favor of it, to take out that language of number 2. I just, with all due respect and deference to Supervisor Quinn, I just would rather we didn't have anything to do with it at all. And in looking at it, we could, and I'll defer to Mr. Sandy on this, I can't quote the site plan requirements out of the code. I don't deal with them every day. But do we even need anything that says, other than that the site plan will be prepared? Because the second sentence says it'll be prepared and contained. But isn't that all by ordinance anyway?
I'd have to look exactly at the ordinance recently.
Please.
I'm just wondering if there's some additional things that were requested to be on the site plan.
Yeah, that's what I want to make sure we don't leave out.
I have to read it. I don't know it by heart, sorry.
And if that's the case, that they are extra things to the site plan, then maybe that last part of it after the semicolon there on the next to last line, where it says all of which shall be outside of the right of way / easement. I just wonder if there might be a motion to reconsider that could be taken up to just take that language out.
I mean, basically you have the general stuff like the boundaries, the layout of if there's any buildings, if there's any parking or landscaping, setbacks. Usually have the zoning of the property, the adjacent properties.
Sounds like these may be specific to this case.
It says existing or proposed streets, easements, their names, numbers, and width of existing public utilities of all types, water courses.
And I think clearly these are specific to this one. And
I think so. That's what,
yeah, I
when
would
I'm looking
recommend
at it.
maybe putting a period in place of the semicolon and taking that last part out. I just think that's, Mr. Quinn and I talked about it, I agree with him. It's the site plan, but on the other hand, if we got called upon to enforce a site plan, what in the world would we do?
Right, right.
That's where I'm concerned.
Well, that's what I meant when I said I think we're meddling in an area of this we shouldn't be in.
Okay,
Candidate for making a motion to reconsider.
all right, do I hear a motion to reconsider?
I'll make it.
Second?
All right. Mr. Gwynn, would you,
You would just vote in favor of reconsidering and then restate the motion on the Glade Hill, just leaving out that part.
We would just have two separate motions.
There'd be two separate things.
Yeah, so our motion would be to reconsider the motion.
all right. So we have a motion and a second to reconsider the Glade Hill SUP. And any discussion before I call for final vote? Okay. You need a roll call or you need a voice vote on the reconsideration?
I'll do roll call.
Okay.
Supervisor Quinn?
Yes.
Supervisor Smith?
Yes.
Supervisor Jamison?
Yes.
Supervisor Mitchell?
Yes.
Supervisor Carter?
Yes.
Vice Chair Tatum?
Yes.
And Chairman Thompson's absent for the vote.
Okay. So we're
So
going
you just need a motion, similar to one Mr. Quinn's already made, except moving out the language after the semicolon. The conditions that staff recommended.
someone have that in front of them that they can read out?
I'd make a motion that, so condition 2 reads as follows. A site plan shall be prepared for the current operations and approved by the county zoning administrator. The site plan shall be prepared and contain all information required as specified in the section 25-670 of the Franklin County Code.
And Mr. Mitchell, can we go ahead and, since we talked about that being specific, say including indications of the area for loading and unloading, ingress and egress of the property, vegetative screening, as well as storage areas?
I can't remember all that.
I just said it.
He just said it.
Okay,
Amy's got it.
okay.
Okay.
It's like, do you agree with that?
All right.
I
We-
agree.
We have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on this before I call for a final vote? Okay, Madam Clerk, will you take a roll call on this?
One-
second?
Yes, Mr.
Is that all of them?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Supervisor Jamison?
Yes.
Supervisor Mitchell?
Yes.
Supervisor Carter?
Yes.
Supervisor Smith?
Yes.
Supervisor Quinn?
Yes.
Vice Chair Tatum?
Yes.
And Chairman Thompson's absent for the vote.
All right. Anything else?
The no, that's.
I think we need to make sure we communicate that, Mr. Vice Chair, to both sides, if that would,
Do we usually do,
if that's the right thing to do.
a special use permit? I mean, do we type one out and then send it to them after it's been passed? That'll take care of it.
Okay, okay, perfect.
Mr. Whitlow?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. A few things under our items today. And this one is regarding the Transportation Planning Organization, which includes several localities in the metropolitan planning area, the MSA, which Franklin County is part of the greater Roanoke area, but what we are not a part of is what's called the Transportation Planning Organization, and that is based on census numbers, typically traffic patterns. It's done about every 10 years. And so this board may recall we have had the opportunity to join that organization as an ad hoc, if you will, advisory member. Supervisor Smith sits on in that role. There's now an opportunity working with the regional commission staff, knowing the growth of the US 220 corridor, specifically the Blue Ridge Innovation Corridor with the growth in Danville and Martinsville. A lot of commuting patterns are now changing with more commuters and residents living in Franklin County, both commuting into Roanoke Metro, but also commuting to Franklin County out of the Roanoke Metro. And so that being said, we do have this opportunity, and I don't necessarily need a board vote per se, but if it's, do want to make the board aware of this, ongoing conversations that staff and Supervisor Smith and so forth are having with the Regional Commission for this opportunity. It will, if we are approved, it will require the organization to, if you will, approve our joining of that group, it may open up funding opportunities for the US 220 corridor specifically with some federal, maybe transportation dollars. And also it just furthers our seat, if you will, at the table with that larger organization. So we really just need consensus, if it's a consensus of the board, again, to pursue this opportunity. See some heads nodding? Okay, all right. I think that gives us.
They're agreeing or they're nodding off.
Okay, that maybe a little of both. It's been a long afternoon, Mr. Chair. The other, and this I may throw the football back to Jim Gwynn on this one earlier. Jim and I had a conversation earlier today regarding recent school board action. Last week, the school board voted. There's the at-large seat on the school board. And the school board had, as part of their discussion and deliberation last week, the opportunity to pursue some research, some legal research, and to look at the feasibility the school may be pursuing as to how, if that position were reevaluated to be either not part of the school board or to be a part of the school board. I think it was a unanimous discussion at that meeting, but it also was that any legal costs would be shared with the county. Of course, there's a couple of implications with that. One being we have our attorney that represents the county's interest, and of course the school system has their attorney that represents their interest. So I'll pause there. I want to make sure that we have a response back. I had some conversations with the superintendent last week back to the school system, but Jim, I hope I framed that conversation well with the board.
I think so. And I expressed to you this morning, I'm sorry, Chris.
Long day.
My concern, frankly, from a technical, ethical standpoint, as far as if the position comes back different than what the board wants, or if the attorney is researching something the board doesn't want, you're paying for it, you're sort of making them your attorney.
I agree.
And I think that's a concern. Now, the odds of it happening may not be great, but if it does happen, you're in a really weird situation because you paid, but you can't really rely on what you get. So I would suggest maybe that we wait and see what the report is that comes back, and we'll review it at that time to see what we can do.
If they decide to do this, and remove that seat, is there anything that the board here has to do to make that happen?
I think so. I think we'll be the ones carrying the water at that point. But I think the concern was, when this initially was broached, was that if the school board had this in mind, that they needed to be the ones to bring it forward. And once they brought it forward, then it's kind of up to us to carry it on over the finish line. We'll do that.
I'd agree with that.
Okay, I'll report back if that's a consensus with the board to the school school superintendent's office. The
Yeah, 'cause
discussion.
I think
as
it
to-
would be in good form if Mr. Gwynn agrees that we would have a formal request from the school board to carry the water, if you will, from that perspective and get it on the record.
Most certainly, and in the meantime, the explanation as to why we can't really commit of funding that legal research, of their legal research, essentially. It's their legal research and not so much ours. Yeah, we'll communicate that back.
Did this board create that seat initially?
We must have.
I didn't think we did. I thought it was created by the circuit court judge.
But when I say we must have, I assume we're the ones who brought the case with the Supreme Court judge. I'm sorry, the circuit court judge.
Yeah.
I don't think it just, not knowing the judge, it could have, but I don't think it just appeared. I think we were. I think that there was something, I really haven't gotten a very good explanation of how it came to be. We've looked at some minutes, we haven't found anything about that. But I think there was a concern at the time, this was back when the Voting Rights Act still was in play, and you had to get things approved and this, that, and the other. And I think that in going forward and going with an elected school board, this was
I was under
That's my
the,
surmise.
I understood Monk, or Judge Davis created that position, but I don't know.
That's my understanding too, but I think that it was as a result of having to be approved by the circuit court judge. So when the board took it to him, I think he came back and said, I'll approve it provided you do this. Which would not be out of character.
Yeah.
I would assume their lawyer or their research would come up with an answer to all this, right?
Right.
We'd know at that point.
And also that they would take a vote after they get that, asking us to take that action. I don't think we want to go. We don't want to be making changes to the composition of the school board if they don't want.
Okay, gives me direction. Any other concerns there? Okay, all right, Mr. Chairman. Couple of other things I think we also talked about, the potential for, as part of the budget calendar, a joint school board meeting, maybe to review some budgetary things on Thursday, January 16th. But looking ahead, I know we're at the holiday season, so several things are before us. Of course, in addition to our work session this coming Thursday, of course, the Thanksgiving holidays next week in county offices, and just a shout out to all county employees, just very thankful for their dedication. We have a tremendous team here in Franklin County, and so a shout out to everyone, and very blessed this holiday season. Of course, then we have some other, it's also the season of tourism. Tourism continues even into the winter. Beginning Thanksgiving evening through Christmas. Each evening, Land of Lights. Mr. Mitchell, don't know if you need to put shades on your house this year. I think they've added additional lights, so it may be a little even brighter out there in Sontag. But that's
My
up.
son already wants to go through because he sees them hanging on the tennis court.
It really is a nice, it really is a nice thing. And Parks and Rec staff, they always outdo themselves in everything they do. And certainly this year is going to be no exception. So a lot of additions there, Land of Lights. So nice for Franklin County families and visitors alike. Moving forward, November 30th is our Small Business Saturday. And the Santa is going to be at the bridge. And so they're at the lake, but Small Business Saturday is countywide. And of course, I know a lot of people talk about Black Friday, but Small Business Saturday, economic development staff and tourism staff, they've been really busy this year. Working with Town of Rocky Mount, Town of Boones Mill, as well as all of our villages. They were out earlier in the week visiting Ferrum, Union Hall. They canvassed the whole county, trying to get out to talk up Small Business Saturday for our citizens to buy local for the Christmas holiday season. December 6th is the holiday lighting of the tree on the courthouse lawn. Also, there's a Boones Mill Christmas parade that evening. December 7th is Come Home to a Franklin County Christmas. That's from 4 to 8 p.m. On that Saturday evening, it's different this year. And then December 8th is the Rocky Mount Rotary Christmas Parade. That's at 3 p.m. We will be giving you, Board of Supervisors, more information regarding the float and when to be there and when to line up. It's always a fun time. And so that's ahead. And then, of course, December 12th, we're right at our next board meeting. Just a reminder, that's a change to our board calendar. Of course, we will have our regular board meeting in December on Thursday, December the 12th. And then, of course, then we'll be right at the holidays. And then January 2nd is the first business day of the year at 4 p.m., which will be our board organizational meeting of the Board of Supervisors, followed by the annual 5:30 p.m. Farm Bureau dinner. So a lot going on. There's also a Chiefs and Captains dinner. The board's invited to that. They're the first week in December. You should have invitations in the mail to that. And Mr. Chairman, there's a lot of events coming up, and that's all I have.
All right. Other matters for supervisors. I'll start over with Mr. Jamison. Do you have anything? Mr. Mitchell?
I had a wonderful time at VACO with all of you that were there. It was refreshing to talk to other people, and I came out of there feeling pretty good about us. I think we have a great organization, and I really enjoyed my time with you all. And reviewing the accounts payable paperwork, it's, as Brian brings up all the time, the inflationary pressures that faces it is, as soon as you open that packet, it just smacks you in the face. And I know we've talked about this time and time again. We have got to do something on this CSA deal. That needs to be I would say we need to have a work session on that. Probably during the budget talk, we figure out what direction we're gonna take on that, because it's gonna break us. That's all I have.
Mr. Carter?
I'm good, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Quinn?
I'm good.
Ms. Smith?
Just real quickly in response to Nick. Nick, I'm kind of toying within my mind, if time allows, when we have a joint meeting with the school board, I think that we need to start talking in earnest about our special ed day program and bringing those children back into Franklin County. That's going to help cut those very significant costs and really start getting serious about what that is going to look like. That will be one major step in trying to reduce cost. And I think that we can pivot from that. But Mr. Whitlow, I don't know if that would be an allowable time given the agenda. But Mr. Mitchell, I wanted to share that with you. That's kind of been my thinking.
Well, and when we do meet about it, that needs to be the number one.
Yes, yes.
It needs to be serious.
The only other thing I had, Mr. Vice Chair, Mr. Whitlow, can you give us an update on the code enforcement officer?
I do understand the position has been posted. I'm not sure. I'm looking at Ms. Cooper. I haven't had any updates as to how far along the process has been in terms of the recruitment, the interviewing, and so forth.
We are in the process of interviewing now, and because of a vacation and training, we interview 3 more people before Thanksgiving, so I hope to make a decision by the 1st of December.
Are you getting good applicants?
Yes. There's a couple that have stood out. We'll decide after we interview the last 3 if we might bring 1 or like 2 back in for a second interview.
If you keep us apprised on that, that would be helpful. Thank you, Lisa.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair.
All right, the only thing I had, I've gotten a number of calls recently, and all of us, I know, get calls from time to time in regard to nuisance dogs and nuisance animals going onto other people's property. I'll just ask the staff, let's check and see what's going on around us as far as how other jurisdictions, there's no leash law in Franklin County. Let's see what our options are. And I know historically that's been pretty much a dead issue, but we might need to revisit it. And also, building permits, I talked to Mr. Sandy and Mr. Whitlow earlier about this. I get calls from contractors all the time complaining about the process of getting a building permit. And largely, a lot of that is completely out of our control because of so many health department requirements and things that they have to do, and people, of course, we're like VDOT. I mean, if there's someone has a complaint on VDOT, do they call VDOT? No, they call us. We have nothing to do with VDOT. But let's make sure that anything that we do have control of, that we're doing our very best to make sure that we're expedient and efficient. And if it means that come budget time this year, if we need to give some overtime money or part-time money or whatever, I know they're short-staffed. I know John is running around like a chicken with his head cut off. And get some ideas and come back to us so that we can let's get a solution and fix it. And because we want people to know that Franklin County is a pro-business, pro-growth county. And when people call and say it's taking them 2 months to get a building permit, that's too long. We need to set a goal on getting that a quicker turnaround, and I'm thinking 1 to 2 weeks tops if we can make that happen. But just y'all brainstorm a little bit, Steve and Chris, get with John and come back with some ideas for the board, and so we can have some good conversation and some good thought and get a remedy and fix this and move on with it. And last but not least, this past summer, of course, July 4th fell in the middle of the week, and we gave an extra day for the employees. And I just want to throw it out there. Christmas falls on a Wednesday. The governor has given them the 24th off. Do we want to close county offices down on Monday and give them a 3-day extra day break, or do we want to open up on Monday just to close back down on Tuesday and Wednesday? I I was asked to bring that up for discussion, and I did. You know, we have the option of giving them the 23rd if we want to. Of course, they'd still have to come in, and, you know, they'd be coming in and working the 26th, 27th. And I know another side of me says, well, by George, if we're gonna do that, why don't we just give them a whole week off? We can't do that, but I was asked to bring it up, and I did, so.
They might get some of those building permits knocked out.
Might get some of them building permits knocked out. You know, the option we have is, you know, the governor has given the 24th, and of course, Christmas is on Wednesday. You know, if we wanted to give them the 23rd, and that way they'd be off an extra day. I can see pros and cons. You know, do we want to open up for Monday just to be off Tuesday and Wednesday? I don't, you know, whatever. But anyway, I guess we can think about it, and if we decide we want to do something with it, we can come back and we can discuss it.
We'll be here Thursday.
Yeah. So just think about it, sleep on it. That's all I had. Anybody else have anything before we recess? If not, we'll be recessed to Thursday at 2 o'clock for the broadband meeting.